Arun Gupta, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Katie, how are you doing?
Good, you?
Well, as well as one can be doing in end times.
Yeah. And during the end times, you said?
During end times, yes,
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
we're getting into biblical eschatology.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. We've been there for a while, but you just brought it out. Arun, this is Josh. Josh Arun. Arun is a very prolific writer.
Hey, Josh.
A prolific writer and journalist. And and he's joining us from Portland, correct?
Yeah, I'm in the exile in Portland.
Exile in Portland, yeah.
I got stuck here.
Yeah.
So
the Liz Phair album that never was. So tell listeners and viewers, please, what is happening in Portland, not just like what you've been observing in Portland, but as someone who's been in the game, the activism and the reporting game for quite a while, if you could give us a kind of a larger context for what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, so, I think what's going on fits in this arc of protests that goes back to the late 90s, the global justice movement, where we saw these type of mass demonstrations in the street recently in Portland with these Black Lives Matter protests, the George Floyd protests, as some people call it. Tonight is going to be the 53rd straight night, which is just absolutely remarkable. They've been largely peaceful protests, nonviolent, but they've been met with a lot of violence by local law enforcement and now by federal law enforcement. And, as of course everyone knows, there's the dramatic video of Trump's secret police who are with the Border Patrol, who come and snatch a person off the streets in the middle of the night, don't identify themselves, just grab them, throw them in an unmarked van like soccer moms from hell, and drive them off and to who knows where. And this is what this happened a few days ago, and it triggered this huge response. And, national media was just like, oh, shit, what's happening in Portland? Like, one of the CNN talking heads is just like, I'm headed to Portland. And I visit the West Coast a lot. I'm based in New York, and I've come out to Portland numerous times. And it's just like, I'm an independent journalist who just does this, through crowdfunding and commissions from various outlets I write for. And it's just like, maybe y'all should have been paying attention to what's been going on in Portland for the last 3 years, because there's a much longer an arc to this, right? Portland has become a testing ground for white nationalism. It's become a testing ground for fascistic mob violence that has been totally aided and abetted by the Portland police. And now it's also become this testing ground for Trump's goons. And they're talking explicitly about wanting to roll this out to other cities. So this is a really dangerous moment that we're at. But I think there's a lot of national reporting there's very little national reporting, in fact, that is really understanding the dynamics that are going on here.
And why is Portland this testing ground for white nationalism, for Trump's goons? Is it just coincidence? Why this place that's so liberal, right? The place that's been, has that Portlandia show.
Yeah. So there are a number of interrelated reasons. And I think some of your other guests, especially the Portland journalists, based journalists like Sergio Olmos and Alex Zielinski can add to this. So one, we have to understand the broader historical context of Oregon was founded as an explicitly white supremacist state. It was illegal for blacks to even pass through the state in the 19th century. It was illegal for blacks under the state constitution until the 1920s to live in the state, to reside in the state. And under state law, any African Americans officials found living here could be flogged publicly every 6 months. And
sorry, you cut out for a second. Every African American found living here publicly
could be publicly flogged. I've seen articles about this stating that this used to be a law that was on the books, and there were parts of this just completely white nationalist racist law that were not repealed until 2004. So Portland is the whitest big city in America, right? The whole Portlandia thing. I mean, it's just so ridiculous, and it has this kind of like really problematic liberal white supremacist framework to it as well. So how that affects today is, one, you have the Pacific Northwest is this bastion of extreme white nationalist, neo-Nazi, Christian identity movements that believe in this idea of creating a white homeland and killing people of color, right? Engaging in that ethnic cleansing, even murder. And this type of activity has been going on for decades here. You know, it starts with like Christian identity, Aryan nation, but practically what it means is the political context for Oregon and Portland is that elected officials do not really challenge the white supremacy, and that means also they don't challenge the police forces who enforce this color line. And so what you have in Portland and Oregon is very cowardly politicians. And so you have an out-of-control police department, right? But that's nothing unique. You know, virtually all police departments are out of control, unaccountable. They only answer to themselves. But when you look at cities like Seattle or Minneapolis or New York or LA, there's much more organized opposition to them. You have at least some elected officials who are willing to push back hard. And you also have social movements that push back hard. And what you really lack in Portland is elected officials. Right now, there's only really one elected official who is pushing back against police violence. That's Joanne Hardesty, the first Black woman ever elected to the Portland City Council. She was voted in 2018. And she has kind of, I want to say a little reluctantly, come to it. But yesterday she issued quite a statement accusing the Portland police of collaborating with the federal police and saying that the mayor is allowing this to happen. Portland has a commissioner-based system. So the mayor sits on the city council and he's the commissioner of police. But I've been told by members of his staff that the mayor's office is, quote, afraid of the police. So you have a mayor that is afraid of his own police. The police withhold information from him. A couple of years ago, there were members, I believe they were affiliated with Patriot Prayer, who were found by Portland police on a rooftop garage with long guns before a large anti-fascist rally was going to take place. And so the obvious implication was, were they like preparing to engage in a massacre? The police find them and they let them leave, and they don't even tell the mayor for 2 months, even though he is in charge of the police. That is how little regard they have for him. So you don't have any sort of even minimal check combined with this white supremacist culture. And this also extends to the prosecutor, who the county prosecutor that covers Portland has been very lax in terms of going after these white nationalists committing violence. You have a police force, that the local alt weeklies, Willamette Weekly, and also Portland Mercury, which Alex Zielinski writes for, have uncovered all this type of like what appears to be significant cooperation between Portland police and these far-right violent extremists like Patriot Prayer and Proud Boys, in terms of feeding them information, in terms of protecting their membership from arrest. So when you start, and you also have the local newspaper, the Oregonian, lots of fine reporters, but their editorial board actually has like labeled, anti-fascist here punk fascists, showing that they have no idea what fascism means. And they even ran an editorial piece called Joey Gibson, who's head of Patriot Prayer, who his group actually had a neo-Nazi show up at a rally 3 years ago, who went on a few weeks later to commit multiple murders while yelling "Die Muslims" at two women of color. And the Oregonian had an opinion piece calling him a man of love, right? So you have this whole kind of like generalized white supremacist culture. This is what the police operate under. So then when we look at the last 52 days, we see all this violence by Portland police themselves. The ACLU of Oregon, people can go to their website. They have filed multiple lawsuits. They have two different temporary restraining orders on Portland police. The Portland police have been caught on tape time and time again, attacking journalists, attacking legal observers, attacking medics, attacking the public, attacking protesters who are peaceful. There's a video by a local journalist, Tuck Woodstock. You can go on Twitter and find.
They're coming on later.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
One of Tuck Woodstock's videos from last night shows the Portland police do these things called bull rushes, where they'll like charge in their riot gear at protesters, even when they're not doing anything, and start beating them. Tuck has a video from last night of a man who had his arm broken. I know this man well, and he is just very gentle. He's funny, sarcastic, PhD student, a father, but he's not going to harm anyone. And they broke his arm. And so the thing is, we have to remember all this violence is going on before the feds got here. The ACLU of Oregon is suing the Portland police, has multiple lawsuits over their violence, over systematic unconstitutional policing, over violation of at least the First Amendment, if not the Fourth and 14th as well. So the federal law enforcement, they've definitely amped up the violence. They're even less accountable. They're even more violent, but this is we need to avoid like thinking like, oh, this is just Trump's goons and secret police. There's allegations coming from Joanne Hardesty, the city commissioner, that Portland police are collaborating with federal law enforcement. So the story really isn't about like, oh, the federal law enforcement are an invading force. The story is that the federal law enforcement appears to be working hand in glove with this unaccountable, violent local police force. And that's the reason they're here. That's the reason they're here and not in Seattle, not in Minneapolis, not in New York, not in Los Angeles, because they have an easier time coming in and collaborating with this already violent white supremacist local police force to brutalize and abuse the public. This is why Portland is a testing ground. And this is what none of the national media are even talking about. And the problem of like them parachuting in when there are all these great local journalists who you're going to have who can talk about this. And, you should also talk to them about this broader context. No one is mentioning the 3 years of this Patriot Prayer and Proud Boys and neo-Nazis and neo-Confederates. I've been at these rallies where they come with all sorts of weapons, and the Portland police let them walk around with these weapons openly. And in 2018, Portland police even attacked a peaceful anti-fascist demonstration. They nearly killed one protester with munitions to the back of the head, right? We've seen all those videos of last week of this young man who was shot by federal police in the head, and they nearly killed him. Well, the Portland police have done that multiple times as well. They attacked the anti-fascist protesters, and that enabled the fascists to go into the streets and then attack them. And so at minimum, they created the conditions for this fascistic mob violence, if not actually encouraging it and collaborating with it. So, it's like, let's not just think that this is a problem coming from Trump. This is a problem of this quote unquote liberals in this, progressive wonderland called Portlandia, that they are enablers of fascism as well.